Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to discuss about the topic leadership and practice in NQS Quality Area 1. The quality area we are reviewing in this presentation is Educational Program and Practice, National Quality Standard. This area has been chosen since it is where the pedagogical center of early childhood service lies. According to recent national statistics published by Australian Early Years Research Organization, it is vital to achieve high child outcomes, and the Australian Children's Education and Care Quality Authority routinely demonstrate that Quality Area 1 is the most problematic of all the 7 quality areas that serves most at risk. We will discuss why this area is so difficult and most importantly, will show how good leadership, which is called to us by our course, is the key to transformation of being merely in compliance with the standard of being above it. Now we head to our next slide. What is Quality Area 1? The Quality Area 1 is the what and how of our day-to-day work with children. Its formal objective is to make sure that the program is stimulating and can promote learning. This region is divided into three major standards, namely Standard 1.1 on the program, the curriculum, Standard 1.2 on practice action of the educator, and Standard 1.3 on assessment and planning reflexive cycle. This is all with the help of our official learning framework, the EYLF version 2.0, that find the principles, practices, and outcomes that have to be embodied in our service. Now we're heading to our next slide. Quality Area 1 Theory to Practice. As we have shown in our literature review, Quality Area 1 is not just a set of random guidelines. It is direct operationalization of underlying educational theory. Whenever element 1.1.2 calls on a program that is child-centered and is premised on the concept of culture, it requires a Bronfenbrenner informed practice where we first enter the world of the child by working with his family, the microsystem. Likewise, the fact that Standard 1.2 focuses on intentional teaching and responsive scaffolding is the embodiment of the key ideas of Vygotsky. The teacher acts as more knowledgeable author his or her practice to recognize and elaborate learning in the child through the zone of proximal development. Now we're heading to our next slide, and our next slide is literature review the gap. The most important result of our literature review is the so-called measurement gap. According to a study by Siraj and others, our NQS ratings are not consistent with global research scales, serving scoring above NQS often scored below the instrument on the ERSC or SSTEW, indicating that the framework is content neutral in constant. A recent study by Aero confirms that NQS of high rating of Quality Area 1.3 and 5 with positive holistic child development outcomes on the Australian Early Development Census, and the social and emotional area in particularly. The most important conclusion is that the NQS is effective at measuring outcomes of process, relationship, environment, but does not measure individual instruction content well. Now we're heading to our next slide. And our next slide is what meeting NQS look like. Particularly, to meet the standard involves illustrating an effective and efficient cycle of program, evaluation and practice. As an example, a teacher notices a child who shows interest in insect elements 1.1.2. The educator then utilizes the 1.3.1 assessment cycle, completing this interest in a learning story by connecting into the EYLF and arranging a bug hunt task to complete it the following week. During the following week, the educator carries the bug hunt and answer the child about the question standard 1.2.2. The sequence is a child-focused program based that is compliance with the recommend NQS framework. Now we're heading to our next slide. Going above the standard. Exceeding is not a superior activity only, that it depicts a deeper reflective process. It is a unique process that is guided by element 1.3.2 critical reflection. During an exquisite service call, the group examines the bug hunt and notices that further investigation of the child was hindered by the level of knowledge of the educator themselves. The team that critically reflects on their practice and discovers a gap and uses theory, says Vygotsky, to purposefully create a more intricate experience, say a warm palm, to scaffold learning about life cycle. The practice therefore becomes more than a cycle, following and is necessitated by critical thought. Now we are heading to our next slide, and our next slide is the great pedagogical divide. The slide discusses the greatest challenge, the two components that are unmet most commonly according to national data are intentional teaching 1.2.1 and child-directed learning 1.2.3. It is a false dichotomy that seems to be the root of what appears to be paradoxical. Most teachers are convinced that they have to make a decision between intentional teaching and child-directed play, and therefore, because of their fear of spoiling play, they transform into passive participants and became not active intentionally. Vygotskian theory addressed this by placing the child-directed play 1.2.3 as the setting where the educator is an observer, and intentional teaching 1.2.1 as the scaffolding that is used to expand the play. Now we're heading to our next slide, and our next slide is problem leadership gap. The second obstacle is structural, and it is the most imperative to this course. What is the reason why so many services fail QAR 1? Because they also fail quality area 7. The NQS framework is framework that clearly provides in element 7.2.2 that the educational leader has a role to play in guiding the whole quality area 1 program and assessment process. The available literature on quality improvement shows that ineffective leadership is a major barrier. The educational leader position is usually nominal and allocated to someone but staffing with no specified time, no pedagogical leadership training, and no actual authority to effect change. Now we're here to our next slide, and our next slide is recommendation continued improvement. To begin with, and most importantly, invest in leadership governance should give the educational leader special off-floor time to engage in critical reflection and mentoring. Personal second, capitalize on that leadership to do professional development that definitely ends the play versus teaching debate by training every single staff member in a unified Vygotskian based approach to teaching. Now we are heading to our last slide, conclusion. To sum up, Quality Area 1 is much more than a checklist. It is the engine that drives our practice. The experimental result shows that to score in exceeding rating, a refocusing should be performed. In particular, the focus should no longer be on what has been done, on the logic behind the action. The name of exceeding is a dynamic process that entirely depends on a culture of deep and critical thought, which is requirement of element 1.3.2. This kind of culture cannot be developed haphazardly. Rather, it has to be a careful nurture, properly funded and guided by component. Empowered educational head. Thank you. We can be approached with any subsequent question.